Saddle up your horses.
Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast, and we are gonna be set for a Mailbag Wednesday. I believe we had in total of 4 questions, and we're also gonna do something a bit different. Is that we are also going to be taking some of the questions from you listeners in the comments, and we will try our best to hit and tackle every single one of them. So make sure you put it in the comments, and we will air that comment on the show. And it'll probably be fitting to at least ask one of the questions, because we do have an update on a certain situation in a Broncos positional room. And I figured it's probably appropriate that even though we are doing a Mailbag Wednesday, we lead it off with the speculation that we had on the last show when the visit and meeting was happening, and that is that J.K. Dobbins will in fact be a Denver Bronco. He officially signed today, which is day 2 of mandatory minicamp. He was I have a guess that he was there yesterday. He just, due to some stuff that he wasn't wanting to, he didn't want to sign his deal and everything. And so, but Dobbins is in the fold, and it is a 1-year, I want to say it's like a $2.7 $5 million deal with the incentives to grow to to grow to about a little over 5. So it's in essence the same kind of deal that Nick Chubb got when he signed with Houston. And there might be some regurgitated topics that we say here based on last week's show, but guys, I'll give it to you, Brandon, first. But what was the initial takeaway, finally, that Dobbins is finally in the fold?
Yeah. Honestly, I think this was like a great zero risk signing, or even maybe not zero risk, maybe low risk, just because he does have some injury risk. But in terms of what the running back room looks like, obviously you have RJ Harvey in there that you spent fairly high draft capital on. Bidet who knows what's going to happen with him. And then Jaleel McLaughlin is kind of also up in the air, and you don't really know what's going to happen there. But the reason I say no risk or even just low risk is you don't have to sign JK to be your primary bell cow. You don't have to give him 300 carries, 300 touches in the next season, right? But you get him on a pretty low cost deal, is $5.5 million or something. Very, very no brainer signing that only improves the running back room that was just absolutely just so terrible last year. You have to do whatever you can to improve that as much as you can. And even though, drafting RJ Harvey does that, adding J.K. Dobbins does that as well. And he has some injury concerns, but he was very productive for the Chargers last year. On the Ravens, he was a very productive back, very talented, still only 26. The biggest thing for me is he's good at pass protection, and that's huge because that is something that RJ Harvey is not fantastic at, especially given just his size and stature. I mean, he's thick, but he's only 5'8", right? So it's a bit harder to do. And he needs some coaching there. I mean, not that he can't do it, but you definitely didn't really have a great pass blocking running back. And now we have J.K. Dobbins for that. So even if that's all he does, I love it, but he also gives you something as a runner as well. And again, I don't think there's really any downside to this signing. You're not paying him a ton of money. The only downside would be to potential fantasy teams that were counting on RJ Harvey getting every single possible touch that he could in this offense. But in real life football, this is fantastic.
Yeah, in real life football, I think it helps out actually RJ Harvey in the long run.
Oh, for sure.
So I know he won't be getting the everyday touches or every play touches like how Brandon referred to, but in terms of staying fresh and having more of a big play ability whenever he's out there due to him just being fresh and not being there every single snap and every single down is better for the Broncos and the offense. So I like the J.K. Dobbins signing. I believe what everybody else believes in. I mean, there's very minimal risk here. I think Sean Payne actually really loves his running back room. And I know a lot of people have reacted to the RJ Harvey of, that means he doesn't believe in him or whatever. He doesn't like what he's seen out of him. I don't think it's that. I don't think Jaleel McLaughlin is that impacted by this move either. I think the one more impacted, and we've talked about it in the episode before, but I think it's more so of an estimate type of situation and deal here. But I do believe that the new 1-2 punch for the Broncos with Dobbins and Harvey is going to be really good.
And I felt like it was Jaleel, and it might still be Jaleel, but kind of reading up on it, and you read the stats and you read the stuff that Dobbins has been so good in the early parts of his career, which, by the way, he's only 26 years old, which is crazy. That he's only 20. Yeah, unless you go find a certain tweet that a Bronco fan shared, I believe it was Tyler, where apparently he's approaching 28 years old, and he hasn't even approached 27 years old yet. No, it was just it was one where I originally had speculated that it was going to be Jaleel's spot. But when you kind of read up the fact that, according to Pro Football Reference, he was in like the top 4 of yards after contact per attempt, or top 6 rather, if you will. And then you'll even look at RJ Harvey's stats from college, and he was in the top 10 of 70% of the attempts, rushing attempts in college. And so, I mean, if you have a 1-2 punch like that, that is dynamic. And so I don't really think that there's going to be a true like 1 and 2. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's ever going to be a true 1 and 2. Like, there's going to be a 1A, 1B. And the real debate's going to probably end up being, who is that 1A and 1B going to be? Maybe we were right on some predictions in the sense that Harvey will maybe be 1A by the end of season's end. But it starts probably with JK, even though the roles will still probably be roughly the same, by season's end. I think the one area where the one significant area where I think that Dobbins is going to be so effective is, you have the pass protection aspect, right? And I think that, to be honest and everything about it, you have that is the area that they are going to be missing Javonte Williams, right? Or even Samaje Perine for that matter, right? Like Perine and Javonte were phenomenal pass protecting backs. And you look at the Dobbins aspect of this, that is probably the one area where they are going to have maybe the biggest impact. Dobbins is going to have the biggest impact in pass protection. So when you talk about his responsibility and you talk about some of the role that he might have in this offense, I feel like he's going to be kind of what Javonte was, maybe not the lion share, right? Like the lion's share of the load or lion's share of the carries. But responsibility, I have ventured to guess it's going to be, the third down pass protecting back, reliable threat out of the backfield who can still catch the rock as well, and also not fumble. I mean, like in looking at some of the even the stats, he only has 2 fumbles in his entire career, and those 2 fumbles were at the very beginning of his career, which is like 2 of his rookie season.
Yeah, those you can throw out. Like that's just rookie. That's rookie ball. That happens.
Yeah.
Who was the running back? I think it was the Chiefs running back that like literally didn't fumble a single time in his entire college career. Fumbled on his very first run.
Oh, Was that Pacheco?
I don't know if it was Pacheco. Was it Kareem Hunt? I think it might have been Kareem Hunt. Did Kareem Hunt go to Toledo?
I think that sounds right. Is that it was actually because it was some scenario where and I think they won the game too. But yeah. So
yeah, for sure.
And actually, that sort of leads us into a first mailbag question, if you will, and it's an appropriate one, and it was actually Big Mike who sent this. How would you divvy up the snap percentage of the new running back room? And I assume, obviously, in large part, this is, this is probably the 1A and 1B situation, but still, it's good to include, Estime in here, possibly Blake Watson and Jaleel McLaughlin as well.
I think I have a percentage in my mind. I think real quickly, I would go just straight up from the top of my head. I go 50% J.K. Dobbins. I'll go 35 R.J. Harvey. I'll go 10 Jaleel, and then 5 Estime.
Okay. Because I think the other part of it too is I know they want to run the ball. I know they want to run the ball. And so, I almost, even though I want to say based on snap percentage, I think I'll probably say 45-35 is going to end up being, Dobbins and RJ Harvey. But I will say, I will say at the season's end, I think that's where you'll probably see that 50-35, right? The 50-35, or a little bit of a larger discrepancy with RJ Harvey, because I think by season's end, Harvey's going to kind of run away with the idea that he'll be 1A of that room. So, but I think you'll see a more well-balanced part of that.
Yeah, I think, there's two directions I could kind of see this going, to be honest. One is we give RJ Harvey the rock more in the beginning of the year and just kind of acclimate him to the speed of the NFL and kind of get him more in a rhythm with the offense, and keep J.K. Dobbins maybe on a little bit of a snap count, maybe use him more on the goal line. Obviously still have Audric Estime, who, don't forget, I did not forget Audric Estime when I was speaking about the running back room earlier. I just don't know what his role is going to be. The reason I would say that is one option is if you wanted to have J.K. Dobbins fresh for maybe a little bit later in the year, especially if you're trying on a playoff run. Not that you're not going to play him at all until then, that's crazy. But I could see it maybe even being 50% RJ Harvey, 30% J.K. Dobbins, 20% somewhere with the rest of them. Maybe some of that's Blake Watson, Audric Estime, whatever that ends up being. Something like that. I mean, that's one option. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the option, but I could see the reasoning behind that. And then you're kind of getting RJ Harvey more acclimated in the offense. You could also go the other way around, kind of like you guys had said, where you ease Harvey into it and you make JK kind of the main guy, but just again with his potential injury concern, there's some downsides to that too. But I mean, I don't know. It could also just be a straight split RBBC of just I don't even know, 40% RJ, 40% JK, 20% the rest of them or something like that. If I would say what I would want to see happen, I think I'd want to see I think I'm kind of in the 50% give it to Harvey, 30% of it give it to JK, divvy up the rest of it however you see fit. Just because I want to see RJ Harvey in this offense. I think he's just going to be more explosive than J.K. Dobbins, to be honest. Like, I like J.K. Dobbins, but he does have some tread on the tires. We need production from our running back room to help Bo out in his second year. I just want to see whatever that's going to look like, where we can get more production there. I mean, like, not that we can't get it from J.K. Dobbins, but just like, and he's obviously proven himself very capable as a running back. Last year, his best year, but again, I want to keep him fresh. I don't want to have to lean and put everything on RJ Harvey's plate, but I think giving him 50% of the snaps in the beginning of the year even is manageable and allows him to just get more in sync with the offense. And I mean, running backs as rookies, like, infamously the position where there really is not much, if any, of a learning curve, and you have guys come in immediately and produce at extremely high levels. But I don't think it could hurt to give him a little bit more initially, just to get him acclimated with the offense. But you now are in a position where you don't have to give him, 70% of it, right? Which I think is helpful. But that's what I'd like to see. I think it could go either direction, but I do think it's going to probably be however you split this up, it's going to be the RJ and JK show, and then the other guys are going to be sprinkled in. Like, that's what I think is going to happen. It could go more RJ, it could go more JK. Who knows?
And actually, because of the idea of a 3 running back system, I wouldn't even put it past to where it's 40-40, and then you have 10, or I should say 10 to 20, with the guys of like Estime and Jaleel, right? So yeah, I think it is certainly one where that'll be, and I think there's also something to be said, and we. And even in a running back committee like approach, right? And that is something that Sean has always had as a running back by committee. There's the hot hand, right? Like, there is the hot hand. And say Harvey comes in and he steals the show. He is like red hot at the beginning of the year. To your guys' point, I don't know if you want to stop that or cool that off by any means. So if he's red hot at the beginning part of the year, I'm not sure I want to cut down on those snaps. If anything, I would rather maybe increase it by like every 2 or 3 weeks. So I don't know. I just we can't certainly discredit the idea of like, hey, RJ Harvey gets hot or J.K. Dobbins gets hot, because I think at some point, like, there's going to be a point where, say, both are hot at the end of games, you have 2 players that you can be able to lean on. And, if he's still here, Audric Estime has at least shown in big games, I should say, one of the biggest games, and obviously the result we have officially erased from our memory, not kidding. I'm actually kidding. Was the Chiefs game. He was really good in the Chiefs game. That final drive. And that was like his biggest moment of his NFL career, and they relied on him. And he got the job done for all intents and purposes. And obviously he was inactive for the Bills game and everything, and much can change from that Chiefs game to the Bills game in the playoffs. But so he's at least capable in the sense we've seen it. So if it all comes to fruition, they at least have some different backs that they could possibly rely on. But it first starts with Harvey and JK. We'll get to the mailbag questions first, and then we'll get to some of the questions in the chat. And let's go with and this came from Eli on Manely Broncos, and I'm sure that our wide receiver guru is wanting something to say for this. But is it too late for Troy Franklin based on last season?
I think it's not too late at all because there's still a lot of unknown in this wide receiver room, at least in my opinion. It was not funny. It was interesting to read all the replies and comments under my certain post when I think it was once we signed J.K. Dobbins, and I posted on Twitter that we're a scary Terry or we're just a wide receiver away from really, really like winning the West. And a lot of people were, let's just say, very confident in our wide receiver room, and more confident than I am. I can certainly tell you that. But I love the optimism by a lot of people with this wide receiver room. I hope I get there one day. Just need to see the production first. But again, just because of the unknown in the wide receiver room, I do think Troy Franklin has a golden opportunity in training camp, in the preseason, in these workouts to really show the coaching staff that he's going to take this next leap and do it with his guy, with Bo Nix, that he did it with Oregon, and really emerge as the wide receiver that I know he can be. I know a lot of others may not see him as a very good wide receiver down the line, but he does have the potential for that, and I think Bo Nix can get that out of him. So I think this is a perfect time for Troy Franklin to take that step.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I definitely don't think it's anywhere close to too late for Troy Franklin. Like, he was a rookie last year. Rookies struggle unless you're kind of, like I said earlier, a running back. Like, almost every position, there's some kind of a learning curve. Wide receiver, even though that has been proven recently to be a similar position where, like, you can definitely see guys come in and have just instant, gigantic impacts. The guys that do that are also just like generational athletes. Like, we're talking Justin Jefferson, we're talking Jamar Chase. I mean, he's neither one of those guys. No one is, right? I think, like, you're going to see improvement from him this year for sure. He's had a season under his belt. He's got to play some snaps. He has an off season to get acclimated. He already has that connection with Bo that should just continue to increase. And it's not all on his shoulders. Like, he doesn't have to be the wide receiver 1. He doesn't have to be the wide receiver 2, probably not even the wide receiver 3. Like, he just has a nice opportunity in front of him that he can take advantage of, but it's not like all the pressure is on him. So it's definitely not too late for him at all. I think you're going to see an increase in just production from him. I think he's going to look better. I think he's going to have probably less drops than he did last year. I mean, like, is he going to be perfect? No, I don't think he will be. He's still a second-year player, but it's definitely not too late for him.
If there is one player, if there is one player who's, 21, right? Because he's 21, the same age as Estime. He's still pretty young. If there is one player that I think all of us would feel far more comfortable saying that he will be on the roster, it's Troy Franklin and not Audric Estime. And I think that maybe the question is, maybe even just the other aspect of this question is, for the Broncos is, and what part of it is so fascinating is who will be wide receiver 2 on this team? Like, it's a legitimate question because I think that there are so many different candidates that could be wide receiver 2 here. And this is like in the sense of in-house, like not anybody that they can add. But like Troy Franklin, if he hits the ceiling that, Jordan wrote about on Around the Orange, like he's very well could be wide receiver 2 on this team. If Pat Bryant, for all intents and purposes, between he and Franklin, who we are hearing is dominating from the OTAs and even minicamp, if that trend continues into training camp, they got something to say for wide receiver 2. And then there's the other aspect of that, which is Devon Vele. If Vele shows up the same way he did at the very beginning of the year, in what was it, last year, I don't think there's a debate per se at the beginning of the year who's wide receiver 2. The question might be at the end of the year who would be wide receiver 2. Because I think they have candidates. I think they have some legitimate candidates, for possibly wide receiver 2. I think your highest ceiling of a wide receiver room, if you will, would be Court, Mims, Franklin, and then you divvy up probably Bryant and Vele, right? Like that would probably be at least of your room. So, and I think that a lot of people, when you talk about wide receiver 2, would tend to suggest that it's Mims. And I think a lot of that is just stats, probably, in the production of it. But I don't know if he's a number 2, like a wide receiver 2 per se. But I think that he's probably like a weapon, like probably the number 2 weapon, if you're probably going to say that, because the number 1 weapon, as we all know, is the Joker, Evan Ingram. So if they, and I think we've asked this question before, but like, is there a player on the roster right now that you guys feel, Brandon, and Jordan, like that you feel probably the most comfortable in being wide receiver 2?
Devon Vele.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with
pretty clearly.
I mean, especially with all the reports that came out before even this year, when like in the very beginning of OTAs, where it was like Vele this, Vele that. Everything was about Vele and how great he looked on the field and just his production. Yeah, I know it's OTAs and stuff like that, but there was a overwhelming amount of reports about Vele and how he is the clear-cut wide receiver 2 and all that. And we saw the glimpses last year, so it's not like, oh, I have to see it to believe it. I mean, we saw those flashes last year.
Good flashes, too.
And if he continues to build off of that, like how it has been reported, I know he's not in minicamp right now, but once he does come back for training camp, I mean, I think Vele will be your wide receiver 2. But, Cam, I do agree with you. Your highest ceiling in terms of the wide receiver room is Cortland Sutton out wide, Franklin out wide, and then Mims in the slot. Because I'm telling you, I know we have Pat Bryant 6'2", Devon Vele is above 6'3", I believe, and Sutton is obviously another big one. But Troy Franklin, he is a tall receiver, but he provides another element within that tall receiving room, which is that speed and explosiveness. So I'm telling you, the Broncos really need Franklin to take that step this year.
Yeah, and I think the way to kind of tie a bow on all of this, or maybe ask a little bit of a different question, is it's a continuation of this question, but so the question is it too late for Troy Franklin based on last season? But let me ask you guys this. Is it, say Troy Franklin had no attachment to Bo. He came from a different school. He came from a different place. He's going into a completely new situation that would be, and he had the same rookie year. Is it too late for Troy Franklin at that? Would it be too late for Troy Franklin at that point? Because like that's the part of it too for me is like, that because he also has the attachment to Bo, is probably the largest reason why I feel like Franklin is also not just written off yet.
To me, that doesn't matter at all. Like it's a nice to have, but he still was a rookie. I don't think he's written off if that connection doesn't exist. I think he's maybe on a shorter leash.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's written off by any means. Like you're not going to throw a guy out after one season of struggle.
Maybe that's what I would say is like the leash would be really short.
Yeah, I mean it'd be a short leash, but again, he's the wide receiver 4, maybe. Like I don't think it'd be that big of a problem. I mean, could he maybe get less snaps? Probably. Is he going to be a big focal point of the offense? Absolutely not. Like, if they don't have that connection, like, he's going to be a depth wide receiver for you, but you're not going to write him off. I mean, sure, after a couple of years, if he doesn't produce, it doesn't develop, could he just be a practice squad dude? Yeah. Could that still happen now? Yeah. But again, he was a rookie. Like, I'm not saying that anything is defined yet.
Yeah, I get where that's coming from, and I agree with Brent on that. I think he would have a shorter leash, but I think you have to look at it from just the makeup of the wide receiver. Again, 6'2", he's somewhat tall for a wide receiver. You know, he has a slim, makeup of a body. Fast, explosive. He brings something to the wide receiver room that they don't have. So I think when you look at that also plays a factor. But I do agree. If he had no attachment to Bo Nix, I think it'd be a shorter leash, which is what may be unfair. I mean, that's a debate within itself. But I think you still have to look at his prototype and see that there's obviously potential there.
Moving on, we get to a couple questions that were actually sent to us last week in terms of some topics to talk about, and I think it's appropriate, given the fact that it's a mailbag, that we talk about it. And that is, one actually came from Landon, who might be in the stream here still, and he asked, how long will Sean hold on to his high-level assistants? Meaning guys like Zach Streif, Jim Leonard, and I want to say Darren Rizzi would be considered a high-level assistant. And I know Rizzi was a coach at one point with the Saints, but
Davis Webb.
Of course, Davis Webb. Of course, can't forget about Davis Webb. But how long will Sean hold on to his high-level assistants? Because I'll have to look it up, but I want to say Aaron Glenn specifically had been with the Saints for a decent amount of time, and Dan Campbell had been with the Saints for a decent amount of time before they left to go to Detroit, and Campbell taking Glenn with him to Detroit.
I mean, it is hard because I think Sean obviously would like to keep his high-level assistants for as long as he can. But I think the reality of the matter is once Davis Webb gets that call and it's going to be a big promotion for him, I think you can't say no to it. I'm hoping. I mean, I know this is probably a dream, but I'm hoping Davis Webb stays as long as Sean Payne stays in Denver, and then he can take his spot once Payne retires. I mean, I know that's probably unrealistic, but I think Davis Webb by far probably has the brightest future in that coaching staff, which is pretty crazy to say because there's a lot of high-level assistants on this coaching staff. So I would like to hear Brandon's thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much impossible, honestly, to answer this question. Part of it depends on what you define as high level. I think a lot of this is, I don't think there's really a ton of risk, to be honest, because just based on what we're seeing happen in the league, are there situations where, like, I mean, Aaron Glenn going to the Jets, like, obviously is like a recent thing that's happened, but the point I'm making with what I'm trying to talk about here with Aaron Glenn specifically is, like, you don't really see a lot of defensive guys get poached. You see more of the offensive guys get poached. You see the offensive coordinators get poached. And when you don't have an offensive coordinator, I mean, we have one, but we don't really have one. We have one in title. We have one who assists.
Yeah.
It's not really our offensive coordinator, right? I mean, like, and Joe Lombardi, he's also not even a hot name. He's not a hot rising coordinator, right? Yeah. He's been in the league for 30 years. I don't think that's really going to be an issue. The biggest one to me that, like, there's risk is definitely Davis Webb, but we're not one of those, coaching rosters that it has a lot of young up and comers that could get taken away other than Davis Webb. Like you see with pretty much any other team. And, like, yeah, Aaron Glenn is an example. of the opposite happening, of like a defensive guy who's been around in the league for a while getting his shot finally, and great for him. And could that happen again with Vance Joseph? Sure, absolutely. But I don't know, one, if Vance Joseph wants that again. And people have seen him be a head coach and it not go super well. One second. Excuse me. So yeah, I don't really think it's like a high risk thing. Of the staff, it's definitely Vance and Davis Webb that are going to be the ones that could potentially get poached. But other than that, like, do you even consider your offensive pass game coordinator and quarterbacks coach to be a high level assistant? I mean, like, I know Davis Webb is a big part of what we do, and so I would maybe say like, yes, he is. But if you're talking about like high level coordinators, I don't really think that's going to be an issue. The only thing that is interesting is Jim Leonhard becoming a defensive coordinator in the NFL somewhere. But I mean, as long as he sticks around, if we do lose Vance, like, we have a great in-house candidate, and vice versa. So Jim Leonhard is a little interesting to me as well. But other than that, I don't really think it's a big concern. Like, offensively, you're not really going to lose anyone except for Davis Webb, which is nice. I mean, you're going to have that most of that continuity. And like, could a lower level guy get a promotional offer to go somewhere else? Sure, but that happens all the time. But in terms of, like, again, the big high level assistants, I don't think that's really an issue. Jim Leonhard obviously is a name to keep an eye on. And then just depending on when Davis Webb gets some kind of shot as probably an offensive coordinator, those are really the names that I would watch. But I don't think it's a massive issue. It's more of a keep your eye on it.
I think if of the people that I am most confident in staying, of the young guys, which would be, Wright, Leonhard, Streif, and Webb, like, I would probably say I am less confident in Webb, and I am more confident in guys like Streif and Leonhard staying. And maybe it's just because I have some of the Big Ten ties a little bit, but I just think that with Leonhard, and I don't know if this truly is his thought process, but he was shafted at Wisconsin. I mean, like, he should have been their head coach. And I think if you look at what's going on with Wisconsin lately, they probably should have hired, Jim Leonhard, and instead with going with Luke Fickell. But like, the way it went down was, like, he should have been the head coach and he wasn't. They should have taken the interim tag off of him. And because of that, I think he's trying to kind of find a stable organization, one that he could be able to grow in, or, possibly be a successor for. And I think that, the Broncos, at least for all intents and purposes and everything that we know with Sean, is that they, his assistants do seem to stay with him for quite some time, at least a little bit. So I think if you're looking at two people right away, that I would feel really confident in, that would be with Sean for a decent amount, it would be probably Leonhard and Streif. I will say this about Webb. There's a bit of, and this is a different responsibility. Webb has a different responsibility than Ben Johnson, but there's a different, I should say, like, Webb at least has a example to go off of lately, and it is Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson of the Dan Campbell tree, or even Ben Slowick, if you will, in Houston. Granted, CJ Stroud kind of took a bit of a hit last year, pun intended, not just injuries, but also like offensive line and everything. Like, he took a hit last year, but Slowick and Johnson are examples that I think Webb could go off of. And that is, you could be the hottest candidate to be either an offensive coordinator, but more importantly, a head coach. You don't have to take the job. You can interview, you can do your thing, but you can pull out and just say, you know what, I am content with where I am. I recently just got a bump in pay, and I like where I'm at. So at least there's a precedent there that had been set by Ben Johnson to where Webb can just very easily just say, you know what, I like where I'm at, and then he can just go get his job in the next 3 years or whatever. So I think there's at least a precedent there for Webb if he wants to stay long term.
And what I'll add to that, Cam, too, is this is why I'm a little bit more optimistic with Leonard and Webb staying a few more years. And this is the reason why. Like, Davis Webb is a QB's coach. I know that's his title, but he does a lot more than a QB coach would do. And I think Sean Payne has already explained that. And then I know Leonard is also the DB's coach, but I think he's more involved with the defensive game planning as a whole as well. It's very, very rare, or at least I think it is. Maybe we can search this up, but it's very rare from like a QB coach to go from that positional job and then jump straight to head coach.
Yeah.
Usually you would take that promotion of QB coach to offense coordinator, and then offense coordinator, then to head coach.
It's like baseball. Some player like jumping from single A all the way to the majors.
Correct. So
yeah,
that's the reason why I still stay optimistic, because I do believe that, let's say after the season's finished, of course, teams are going to be calling Davis Webb just like how they were this past offseason, just to interview him and just to talk to him at the minimum. I think Sean Payne knows how valuable Davis Webb is, that he would give him the offensive coordinator title and keep him in Denver and then let him go. I think that would be plan A, which I think that's a good thing, because if he was already the offensive coordinator, then I'd be a lot more like shaky on he's on his way out pretty soon. But we can still give him that promotion in terms of the title. I am almost certain that he would kick out Lombardi out of his OC title just to keep Davis Webb, and I would do it in a heartbeat as well. And I think a lot of people would understand. And I would actually say the same thing with Leonard and Vance Joseph. I understand Vance Joseph had a great year last year, and he's becoming a really good coordinator that people respect and like. But there has been a lot of talk about Leonard and how bright of a future he has in his coaching world. And I wouldn't necessarily say that he would kick Vance Joseph out just to have Leonard stay in Denver and give him that promotion to be a DC. But I for sure think there would be talks of, Vance, go try to get a head coaching job now, or if you can, see if there's another DC spot available, because I want Leonard to stay. And listen, he might be somewhere else.
Well,
Davis Webb and the Joe Lombardi position is an interesting point. The one thing I'd push back on there a little bit, or just like play devil's advocate, is would Davis Webb want to take an offensive coordinator position where he's not going to be calling plays? Like, maybe he wants to be able to do that, and that's not going to be an option for him here.
Yeah. I will say what's crazy to think about with Leonard and Vance is and Vance is aggressive. Like, he is one of the most aggressive coaches in the league. If you get a chance to watch like his defenses at Wisconsin, it feels like he's almost as aggressive, if not just a little bit more aggressive at Wisconsin. So it's just, and it's crazy to think about. And I think that also Leonard runs a bit of a varying defense, like a lot of different, defenses. Like, he does run the 3-3-5, and 3-4 and 4-3. Like, he runs a various different scheme of defenses. So I think that would also suit the system well for players, because it's you're working a lot of different systems, so you could just match up quite well and everything. So now that brings us to the first of many, and that would be David Talks Broncos questions. David had a bunch of them in the comments, but he said, and this is a very appropriate one, given even just the J.K. Dobbins signing, because I think if you asked a lot of us, what is one trade, that a lot of us would make, I think the first position that would come to mind is running back. And I think, we can very easily check that box off that running back has been completed. But what is one trade that you would make before the season? And the way that he phrases this is that they should make. This is not that kind of question, but this is putting your dream hat on. What is one trade that you would make before the season? And I will take it to you, Brandon.
That's honestly hard. I don't know off the top of my head exactly who would even be remotely available. I mean, if we're just talking pure dream trade, like imagine Trey Hendrickson on this defense, but
I mean, again, it's what we would
that would be fun.
We would make still, so that's why it's kind of like a dream-ish question,
right? And that's kind of where I'm in more of the like, man, I don't know what we would make because I don't know who's even remotely available. And at the same time, it's like I don't think there's much that we would need to do. Okay, there's one name that kind of sticks out to me a little bit though. I don't think this will be happening, especially given like the fact that they just paid him. But with the dispute recently in San Francisco with Brandon Ayuk, I mean, that would be interesting. There's no way they're trading him now because they already went ahead and paid him. But that'd be
maybe
cool.
Still, though, they might.
I highly doubt it. Why would you go ahead and pay him $22 million a year? Or no, they gave him a $22 million bonus. But why would you pay him and then trade him?
But there is still frustrations going on in San Fran for some reason.
But I also don't know if they're willing to lose any more of that team. I mean, two of them already came to Denver. We'll just make it the Denver 49ers. So Brandon Ayuk, I mean, it's a pipe dream, but that could happen, I guess, technically. So I'll say that. But just again, Trey Hendrickson, if we're talking like pure dream, unrealistic trade, Hendrickson is a no-brainer. Like him on this defense would be disgusting.
Do I even need to say the name, Jordan, or is your mind already there?
It's already there.
All right, go ahead.
Listen, the contract disputes, you want to talk about that? I think the biggest one right now in the NFL, besides the Trey Hendrickson one, is the one happening in DC. Go out, get Scary Terry, whatever they're asking for.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. He's not at practices or minicamp. That's a good one.
You give whatever the Commanders want. I mean, I don't think
that's a really good one.
It's going to be the price everyone thinks is going to be on social media, because that's usually
it never is, really.
And it never is, because I don't think people factor in that you're going to have to give them a contract extension, and teams put that within their trade value of what we're going to give, whatever. So listen, I would go get Scary Terry. You would not have to trade away Sutton at that dispense. I think it would take draft picks. You do it. You get Scary Terry. You pair him up with Sutton, with Mims, with Troy Franklin, with Evan Ingram, with RJ Harvey, J.K. Dobbins, and you go win the West.
Are you paying Sutton? I know you said you're not including, but are you paying Sutton and paying Scary Terry?
So after this year, if we would make that trade, then you would have a long conversation with Sutton with, listen, we just traded for Scary Terry. We're going to have to pay him. Your market is not 20 mil plus. Are you willing to do this? Once he says no, then you just can't do it.
And that's a really good one, but I cannot possibly see the Commanders being willing to make that deal and have Deebo Samuel be their wide receiver one. But maybe that. I mean, that's a really good idea.
Not to tie this to a wide receiver that was already mentioned, but maybe internally, Jaden is really pumping the idea that he wants Brandon Ayuk. I mean, they were teammates, and Washington has new owners who's got a decent, amount of, money to work with. It's a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract. I don't know. They also just traded for Deebo Samuel. Yeah. So, I mean, like, I don't know. Maybe they also want Brandon Ayuk there in Washington. I will keep the San Francisco 49ers theme, though. and I will also give a bonus position and player. I actually, for a trade, I would trade for Jawan Jennings.
That's an interesting one.
I would trade for Jawan Jennings. He is like if you were to build a perfect wide receiver in a lab for Sean Payton, like it would be Jawan Jennings, 1,000%. I mean, like, obviously it feels like, we kind of said that a little bit with Josh Reynolds in a sense. And obviously Tim Patrick was here. But Jawan Jennings, he is an unbelievable blocker. He started to kind of see an uptick in targets in 2024. He only signed a 2-year deal with San Fran. So after this year, he's a free agent. So like I would love the Jawan Jennings idea. And so if it's possible, that you can get Jennings, and then you have that room where you can still keep Sutton, and you have in a room of like really good blocking wide receivers and just reliable targets for Bo at that point, I will take that. And then the other one that I would make, and this is one, and I don't know if Brandon knows, but I know Jordan's been in our PO Slack chat, and and I mentioned this numerous times, but I would trade for Luke Musgrave. If there is like one of two positions as of right now for the Broncos that is probably one of their weaknesses, it is tight end 2 and maybe another linebacker, right? But tight end 2, if you give me Luke Musgrave in the low risk, high reward scenario that the Broncos were going with, so far this offseason, Musgrave with, Evan Ingram and Adam Troutman, just even those three, that is a pretty decent trio of tight ends there. Because obviously, Adam Troutman's not being cut. Sean Payton loves him. He's his love child, so he's not getting cut. But like Luke Musgrave, I like it. I mean, he's was probably regarded as one of the top tight ends in the draft class the same year the Packers took Tucker Kraft, and then due to injury, and scenario there, Kraft just took over. Kraft just took over the tight end 1 role and never really looked back. And Musgrave's just kind of been that tight end 2 for the Packers, or tight end 3 really. So I would like the idea. Low risk, high reward. You put him here. He would be kind of like that inline tight end that's a receiving threat that the Broncos really haven't had stylistically since, like Jeff Hireman or even a healthy Jake Butt for like 4 games when Butt was here.
Man, I'll just tell you what, in the 2027 draft, I'm gonna tell you, my timeline is gonna be filled with an agenda that is gonna be nasty work by me. I'll just leave it at that. I mean, I'm going to be willing to sell the farm for a wide receiver, and people are gonna be really annoyed by it.
I am so thankful you at least braced us like 3 years in advance, 2 years in advance.
Oh, people are going to block me for the asinine things I'm going to say. But it's going to be so worth it.
I assume you're referring to the Jeremiah Smiths, the Ryan Williams, and
I mean, you give up the farm. Are you kidding me? I don't think Jeremiah Smith will be wide receiver 1 on the Broncos right now, and it wouldn't even be close. And I wish I was exaggerating.
I mean, he'd be wide receiver 1 on a lot of teams.
Yeah, and that's why when it's 2027 and the draft is the next day, and I'm on Twitter saying, "Hey, yeah, trade 4 first-round draft picks." Yeah, I'm gonna be that lunatic.
I'm gonna be that lunatic.
That'd be crazy.
Before we jump into the slew of David questions. Let's to some of these questions. Marky Sports Denver chimes in. RJ Harvey over under 67.5 receptions. So I'll have to look it up.
If that number was for targets, I'd still say probably under. Honestly, I'd still say under, actually. To put it this way, in his entire career in college, he had 61.
Wow.
Like, he can do it. It's just not. And, like, maybe he just wasn't used that way, and that just wasn't the way that their offense functioned. But I don't think he's not Alvin Kamara.
Because I was going to say, so
in an Alvin Kamara role, we can use him in the passing game. I'm not saying that we can't use him in the passing game, but I'm just going way under personally.
So
you could maybe sell me on 67.5 targets, maybe, but I still don't think so.
So as far as receptions, the lowest of Alvin Kamara's career was 21 to 22. He had 47 and 57. 47 and 21 and 57 in 2022. The rest, he had 81 in his first 3 years, then 83 in 2020, 75 in 2023, and then 68 in 2024.
Yeah, I'm probably leaning towards the under here. And just because also we're going to be rotating between him, Dobbins, and even when it comes to the passing game, Julian McLaughlin's going to get some touches too in the passing game. So I think I lean under there, especially with the rotation.
So I think he's updating the question to targets.
I'm still saying under.
Targets too, that's different though.
So targets, Alvin Kamara, the least or lowest part of his season that he had of his career was 67.
Oh, there you go.
And then the next was 77. Same kind of year. 2021 was 67. 2022 was 77. And then his first 4 seasons, 100 targets, 105, 97, 107, and then 86, and then 89. 86 in 2023 and 89 in 2024.
Wow.
Javonte had 51 catches last season. That's crazy.
That is crazy.
Didn't we have like the 4th most running back targets in the league or something?
Yeah.
I think we did. And I think actually with Russ, wasn't it like number 2?
Yeah, it was like abnormally high.
Yeah.
I probably will play the safe card and say under, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. Obviously, this was pre-Dobbins, but I did say like there's a window. I think if Dobbins wasn't I will say this. If Dobbins wasn't in the fold, I probably would maybe give it the over as far as the 67.5. But since Dobbins is here, and I think since the aspect of probably we haven't been mentioning maybe enough with Dobbins is that he's also a factor in the passing game. Is I think that is probably another reason why I'll also probably say the under for 67.5. That's crazy. 100, nearly on average, about 100 targets his first 4 years for Alvin Kamara. That is crazy. Okay. So
wasn't there a time, didn't he have like almost exactly the same amount of receptions like 3 years in a row? It was like 88 or something.
That's what I was just saying. He had 81 receptions for the first 3 years. And actually he got like 2 more that year after. So he had 83 in 2020. So he was like 2 receptions off from actually going 4 straight years of 81. Okay. Now we begin the questions asked by David Talks Broncos. Who else from free agency do you want to see added?
I'd have to see who's still available.
Obviously, Jermaine Pratt. Everybody
He went to the Raiders, right?
went to the Raiders. It does somewhat scare me, but not really, because their defense needs way more than just a Jermaine Pratt in the world.
This is true.
Mm-hmm. Who is still available? I mean, no, we're not going to. I don't want Jair Alexander, actually. I'm from like, oh, he was released.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I don't want him at all. Not even close. Man, I don't even know.
I have two in mind, but they're probably very unpopular.
Which means it's probably a high-level name.
I have one guy that's a maybe. Jordan can go first.
Let you think about it more.
Mine's not exciting.
Go ahead, Jordan.
Mine are for sure two names. One of them people are very familiar with, and the other one, former first-round pick, and he's a South Florida kid, so I know him.
Oh.
The first one, and I know this is unrealistic, and I know the thoughts on this guy may be a little, I don't know, half and half, at least on social media for whatever odd reason. And I think he wouldn't accept this role, but I mean, bringing Justin Simmons as a depth piece in that safety room would be quite awesome. But again, I think that is a bit unrealistic just because I don't think he would accept that role. He would want to be starting somewhere. But again, he'd be very cheap, and he is getting a bit older, so I would just say that. But the other one in mind, and he would be another depth piece to that corner room, would be a former first rounder that maybe he can learn from his South Florida buddy in Surtain, and maybe get his feet wet a little bit and get him back on his feet, and that's CJ Henderson.
Okay.
Who was your first one again? Sorry.
It was the former 31, Justin Simmons, as a backup.
Oh, Justin Simmons. I was like, wait, what?
Did that give you an idea back there, or are you just trying to appease me with the Justin Simmons idea?
Imagine if Justin Simmons were to accept a role where he is a backup safety, a leader, a veteran. I mean, that would be quite awesome. But I don't think that happens at all.
Mine is not a sexy name, but it would be Shaq Mason, guard. He's 30, about to be 32, so he's like definitely just a depth internal offensive line piece. But I mean, I think having more offensive line depth is never a bad thing. And he's a pretty good guard when he can play and he's healthy. Again, it's not any kind of a starting role, but I think he's one of the better offensive line options available that we could sign cheaply for decent depth. The other name I considered thinking about, but it's just like there's no reason, honestly, to even waste a roster spot on him, is just doing take a flyer on Jedrick Wills, who's still only 26, but he had that bad knee injury last season, and apparently he just wants to sit out this entire season. So never mind. I mean, you can still take him and stash him. Again, it's a flyer, but I don't think you'd want to waste a roster spot on a guy that will not play for you at all this season. Maybe sign him on the practice squad. Maybe that's a thing. I don't know. But still, even then, I don't even know if he'd play or practice on the practice squad.
Well, what's going on with Asante Samuel Jr.?
Right?
Why is he still on the market?
Is he asking for too much? I think of all the free agents that is out there, like that is probably the one that is puzzling the most to me. Like, because he was, or I think maybe the other part of it is like he's a scheme dependent, maybe. and the teams that he's hoping for and hoping to sign for aren't really calling. So I have a couple. That I would sign.
Oh, I know why.
I have a couple that I would sign. One is probably a tight end that I would say Joe Lombardi knows quite well. And that is Gerald Everett.
Yep.
And then linebacker. This is when we get kind of to a slew of moves that I could see us making. And I will say, there's the CJ Mosleys of the world. I don't want CJ Mosley. But you could talk me into Juwan Bentley. You could even talk me into re-signing Quan Alexander, but not just for not for practice squad, but for actually putting him on the team, like having him on the 53-man roster, and then not having be taken away from you because you decided to sign Zach Cunningham as well. But I want to ask the question: would you take the risk of signing Devondre Campbell?
Isn't he with the Niners still?
According to Spotrac, he is an unrestricted free agent.
What? He played like over 700 snaps last year. So he's not like injury riddled or anything.
No, but he is 31. I mean, it would be. It would be a risk.
Really?
Just in the sense of like, I mean, it's on the wrong side of 30, but I wouldn't hate it at all. Like it wouldn't be let me rephrase. It wouldn't be a risky signing, but there was a risk there because of his age for injury. That's all I meant. But you're not gonna like.
I don't know if I would sign him, but
you have to spend much money. The only thing, I guess, okay. The only other risk is just, do you want that in your locker room? I guess that's exactly. The other part. But on the field, I don't see the risk outside of his age. But the off the field stuff and that personality in your locker room.
The way it ended in San Fran was wild.
I completely forgot what. Yeah, I completely forgot what happened there.
Yeah, I forgot that he left the middle of the game, but I knew that it didn't. I knew there was like just some beef and bad blood there, but I didn't know exactly. Couldn't remember.
Okay,
exactly
that makes more sense on why he still hasn't been signed. I know he's old, but I think that also plays a big factor into
walking.
I don't think Greenlaw and Hufanga, who just left the Niners and probably didn't like him,
right.
I don't think they would like him in the locker room either. So
yeah, specifically even the position of Greenlaw. No, you're bringing in the guy who literally walked out on us.
Yeah, that's starting to be a good point.
But of all the people that is on that list, Campbell is probably the biggest name aside from Bentley on that list. I think that they would be like public enemy number one.
Yeah.
He would be public enemy number one. All right. The next question actually brings us to a player that we actually haven't a chance to talk much of, but he is a rising star in the no pads environment of OTAs, rookie minicamp, and the now mandatory minicamp, and that is Q Robinson. What do you guys make of Q Robinson so far? Obviously, if there is one thing, and this is like to the Troy Franklin point a little bit, or even players that are a bit speedy, a bit, explosive, if you will, guys like RJ Harvey. When you don't have pads on, I would hope you look good. Like I would hope to look good and with, the no pads environment. But if there is one thing we can say confidently from everything we've been hearing from camp, is Q Robinson has an unbelievable get off. He is an athletic freak. And so Jordan, I ask you, what do you think of Q Robinson, and what do you make of him in terms of the overall position and where you fit him in the room? Because it feels like, and we've had the conversation, but like the conversations are all across the board with him of possibly like where he could be.
I mean, obviously we haven't seen much like a lot of clips from mandatory mini camp practice and OTs and stuff like that. I mean, hopefully we're going to get a lot more during training camp, obviously. But I would say from what's being reported, it looks like Q Robinson is a hidden gem that the Broncos found. And it's starting to look like George Payne has this reputation.
Oh, really?
Of finding these pass rushers or these just guys that are just freak athletes later in rounds, like on day 3. And yeah, he's starting to get that reputation. And it looks like Q Robinson, as of right now, again,
Davion Jones is another too.
Yes, and we can only go off of what's being reported.
Yes.
And of course, all the reports that we're going to hear are positive, but we haven't heard other names being reported. I mean, but that's another debate for another day. But I'm just saying, like, from what we've heard about Q Robinson, everything's been positive so far, and he's getting an overwhelming amount of love. So
a lot of love.
This guy that Nick Saban said was one of the best special teams players that he ever had at Alabama.
Yep, and a lot of teams saw that, and we were like, nah, just keep passing him, keep passing him. And then George Payne and Sean Payne were like,
oh,
okay.
Nick Saban's blessing, I will take that.
Yeah, so it looks like I know George Payne has gotten a lot of slack on social media, whether right or wrong. But if Q Robinson does turn out to be like a Jonathan Cooper type player, like in terms of production, or another one of these late guys in day 3 that become a starter eventually, or what have you, I mean, this would be big. And I know he's gonna contribute on special teams day 1, and probably, if we're being realistic, probably for his career, because he's that great of a special teamer. But in terms of getting snaps on the defense side of the ball too, I mean, that'd be pretty special.
David very early on is to our backup tackles just suck, or is Q just the.
I mean, remember Alex Palczewski was getting a lot of love last year, and then they also kept Frank Crum because of his. And
they have a couple undrafted guys that they got this year with some talent, like Xavier Truss, and there's another guy.
So the Broncos are kind of high on their backup tackles and stuff, like the developmental guys. So I wouldn't I don't know. It's pretty interesting what we're hearing.
Yeah. Last question from David would be, what wide receivers, like if we were probably to make a prediction, what wide receivers do you see on the active roster and practice squad? So I will just say there's probably one prediction you can make, and that is Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Pat Bryant, and Devon Bailey are safe bets to be on the active roster. So what is that? Sutton, Mims, Franklin, Bryant, and Bailey. That's 5, right?
Yep.
So that's 5 that are very set in stone. So do they carry 6 or do they carry 7? Actually, I will say a 6 because Trent Sherfield will be in there.
Yeah.
So do they carry 7?
I don't think he'll carry 7. I think if he does carry over 5, it'll just be 6. Trent Sherfield has to make the team, right? Just because of special teams?
He wants to be the Matthew Slater.
Then you have to include him in that wide receiver room in terms of making that 53-man roster. So that would be 6.
So
unless you trade Pat Bryant for Scary Terry and a couple picks. So
actually, no. Your idea was to trade 2 wide receivers for Scary Terry, wasn't it?
Yeah, my original idea, when I was very hyper this morning or the other morning when I typed that in our chat, it was to. I mean, if I could, I'd trade every wide receiver in our damn room. I mean, that's how good. But that's another conversation for another day.
You and wide receivers, I swear. What did Jerry Judy do to you? What about you, Brandon?
Oh man, that's a good question. Man, I gotta agree. I don't think there's any possible way that Trent Sherfield doesn't make this team. So it's got to be at least 6. And really, the question comes down to who shows out enough to warrant potentially having them carry 7. Like that. That's really what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. Does one of the group of A.T. Perry, Courtney Jackson, Michael Bandy, Jerjuan Newton, Yorkeen Davis, or Kyrese White, do any of those guys show out enough where it's like you want to keep them around and you're willing to carry 7 wide receivers to do so? I've heard some interesting things about Jerjuan Newton. So there's definitely some like opportunity there, but to me, I think it's 6, but it's like, it depends on, in terms of 7, it depends on like, does one of those guys prove that they should stick around and that they're worth carrying 7 for.
Yeah.
And obviously that's going to be an ongoing question.
And I think really the question, probably the hardest question, because the easiest question is like the 6, right? At this point, like they're going to carry 6. And it's the 6 we all know. But the question is probably for the practice squad is like, who's going to be the player or players for the practice squad? And I think that's where, it's going to be quite fascinating because, I am really high on Jaquan Davis. Like you, like if, but the thing there for me is like, he's such a raw player that even if he shows out just enough in preseason, like I could see a team just snatching him up and putting them on their practice squad. So, but like I would say I would love to see Jaquan Davis be on our practice squad. That is the one of the wide receivers I will say. And I actually have a wild card. And granted, maybe it's much to do about nothing. But I will say, and maybe it's just to appease the Buffs fans in the room.
Oh boy.
But Will Shepherd, I think Will Shepherd is actually a wide receiver that I would want to keep my tabs on. I think I think of I like the project of the wide receivers that they added for the UDFA room, but I like the prospect of Will Shepherd more. There was probably no player that they added who's probably a more refined prospect of that group than Shepherd. He's clearly fits the Sean Payton mold. Big wide receiver, a huge catch radius. Possession wide receiver. I think his route running is a bit underrated. So I would love to see Shepherd get through this minicamp tryout and that they'd be able to sign him. But he's got to get past there. But I would love to see Will Shepherd on the 53-man roster and on a practice squad. I would love it. Now, I will say this, though, because Tampa Bay has such a crowded wide receiver room. If Bo's brother doesn't make it on that wide receiver room, I think we can all agree where that certain wide receiver is going to be ending up. So at that point, he's probably going to be ending up on the Broncos practice squad. But that is something to certainly monitor. Is that given Tampa Bay's crowded wide receiver room, there's a likelihood that someone significant is going to get cut, aka Trey Palmer.
That's another one I'd be monitoring as well.
Go Big Red. All right. Jeremy chimes in with, has there ever been a more beloved player that has ever taken a snap for a franchise than A.T. Perry? And if you talk to David, David Talks Broncos, he loves A.T. Perry. So he's just angered at the fact that A.T. Perry is not even in practice for mandatory minicamp.
Because I think A.T. Perry can. I'm not saying he is the one, but I think he can provide something somewhat significant to the room. I'm not saying he'd be an all-class type of wide receiver, but he is what I just can't wait for training camp and for these full clips to come out, and especially when preseason when we could watch a whole game. There's so much to watch this year, in terms of the wide receiver room, what happens with the running back, the touches between the running backs, what happens on the defense, how Q Robinson looks, Savion Jones looks. There's just so much to look out for this year.
We all know that Jordan would cut Pat Bryant for A.T. Perry.
Actually, I wouldn't take it that far, but I would say I know Cam said it, he's very, very raw, but if a 6'5", 6'4" wide receiver that runs a 4.3 can turn some heads, just look out.
Does that answer your question, Jeremy?
Jordan would trade every single wide receiver in the room and just get Jerry Jeudy back, and then have the wide receiver 1 to 5 just be Jerry Jeudy, and all their wide receiver sets would just be Jerry Jeudy, line up out wide, and they would have Adam Troutman, Nate Atkins, Burton as wide receiver 4, and they just chuck it every single time to Jerry Jeudy. That would be the ideal offensive scenario for Jordan Lopez.
I mean, he would be open.
You'd think.
I mean,
because 8 defenders would be covering him every single play, because they'd be leaving Burton and Troutman and their wide receiver 2 and 4s open every time.
Funny enough how he left Denver, and then the very first year he gets 1,000 yards with one of the worst franchises in the NFL. I don't know. We can talk about that another day.
There it is. Okay, before we end the show real quick here, we do have one last question, and it comes from Marky, and it's actually a decent question because this did happen with Rizzy. Given the fact that Rizzy chose to go with Group over Lutz just a couple years ago, do you think there's any chance that we go with another kicker this year and save $5 million?
That is a great question, because I completely forgot that
Rizzy did that. I know.
The situation in New Orleans.
Yeah. It's a good question.
Yep.
It may not be this year, but that is, I think, a question to at least file away for next year or even the year after. That is definitely a question that it would be worth following.
I wonder how that relationship is now.
I mean, Sean Payton is obviously the head of that. But it does make you wonder, is it going to be awkward? Was it a good conversation?
You would think they had a meeting of the minds, right? And kind of just aired everything out. And knowing how Sean Payton operates and how he rolls, I would think that conversation happened between Lutz, Payton, and Rizzy, especially with what happened. Because I remember even the agent got into it. Remember on social media? Yeah. It was, I wouldn't say necessarily really ugly, but there was for sure tension there.
It was weird. Jeremy,
Andrew's doing a 40-year-old Matt Prater.
So Jeremy's asking, is Jordan a full convert? I will say obsessed is putting it lightly.
I am the religion, so.
You are the religion.
I am the religion, so. I am the Bible. right, that's a bit insane, but I kind of just played that in my head for a second. And
That is getting clipped.
Yeah, I was just that's gonna get clipped.
Thank you guys so much for chiming in tonight. We'll do another one of these mailbags. It's fun to have not just the mailbag questions that get chimed in from X, Twitter, but also on the YouTube stream. So thank you guys to everybody that chimed in for questions. We will have another show possibly next week where we maybe take a bit of a deeper dive positionally into, before we get into training camp, that sort of thing. But it's gonna be a lot of fun. Thank you guys to everybody that chimed in. Make sure you follow us over there on the X Twitter platform. Follow Jordan at Jordan T. Lopez. Follow Brandon at Brandon Miller PO. And follow myself at Cameron Parker PO. You can also follow the show handle at Manely Broncos. And please, 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 I forgot to say this at the top, but again, we are pushing for 2,000 subscribers on the MHRT network. We have thousands, okay, maybe not thousands, but we have a ton of content on the MHRT network page. Our show is every Wednesday at 7:30. Sometimes it fluctuates based on to fit some of our schedules, depending on how we're doing. But it is at 7:30 every Wednesday. Thank you guys to everybody that has supported us, and we will do another show next week. Until then, make sure that you never forget.
Let's go Broncos! God bless Bo Nix!
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame miles. So high, I might never come down.